All right, and welcome back, guys, to the final round. My name is Jake, and today I want to get into some boxing. A lot of boxing. I've been sort of enamored by not the fight of Canelo versus Crawford, but the amount of media attention that it's garnered the week before and the week after. Um, and maybe it's just been my focus because uh, I was so enamored with the spectacle, and I was gonna make a video about my thoughts about the event itself. But I think I will. I'm giving that more time to digest because I think I'm going to be very biased against Dana White. I don't want to review everything about the event in a very, as I can't, what's subjective or objective? Whatever it is, a subjective or objective, whichever one means not of opinion. I think that's subjective. Or, no, I think that's objective. So I want to get a very objective view, or not subjective, whatever it is. I want to get that kind of view of the card, the event, everything before I make a video on it. Because I ranted about stuff before the card. I want to do all that stuff week or two after to give me not time to cool, but time to my opinions to sit to the level sit to the level and not to like throw it not like I'd be a problem with it, but you know what I mean. Um, oh, wow, look at this guy. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So let's get started. Today's video is about Callum Walsh. This is going to be a video about kind of summing up what's been going on. Summing up his career till now. Sorry, guys. I was looking at stuff for Chris Eubank and Conor Ben too. I'm definitely going to make tons of videos about that fight. That's going to be very fascinating. I I do want to say this though, really quickly about that fight. I think Oscar De La Hoya is right when he said them having a rematch is going to destroy both of their careers. And he's like, I think he's makes some good points. If you guys haven't seen the interview, please go watch it or just go what he said. Um, because there's some real interesting stuff that gets talked about in there. About how like it's so intense that for Chris Eubank, you know, he's 36 years old. He's 35-3. You know, he's a two-weight world champion, even though both titles with the IBO, which is a legit title, but not as legit as the major four, really. Um, but he's 36, so his career is kind of already set. Like, let's say he beats Conor Ben, and maybe defends his IBO title once or twice after that. His career is fine. But for Conor Ben, that's a really big. I mean, he's a good fighter. 23. Obviously he's 23-1 now. He's 28. He's going up a weight class to fight at middle. He's really a welterweight. and, and the whole thing is he's really a welterweight. I know that he's had fights. And speaking of Callum Walsh, if Conor Ben ever stayed at 54, that'd be a very interesting fight. I do think that Callum Walsh, I'll say this now, I was going to mention it at a different point in the video, but I'll mention it now. I do think that Callum Walsh will settle in at 160 at some point in his career. Maybe even go to 168 or light heavy. Probably in his mid to late 30s. Like most, I'm not saying he's going to follow Canelo's career, but he's going to do similar thing. Start at 54, win a couple trials. Titles. He probably won't unify. I'll make that clear right now. He's not going to unify. If he becomes champion, I'll get to that in a little bit. But go back to Nigel Ben. He's 28. So his whole thing is, he's looking at maybe a fight with Lewis Crocker if he ever goes back down to welterweight. I could see that fight being fought at a catchweight, really, at like 150 or like 152 or something like that. But for Conor Ben, he's putting on a lot of muscle. A lot of muscle to go fight Chris Eubank Jr. again. I, I personally don't like it. I think the fact that it's only 7 months removed from, let's be honest, a pretty substantial beating he took. it was a substantial beating. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, he fought good, but you know, the fact that all judges, you know, usually at this level of boxing, judges don't score a fight all unanimous the same score. All three judges scored that fight 116, 112, which means they gave 8 rounds to Chris Eubank and 4 rounds to Conor Benn. That's how I scored it when I watched the fight. That's how I scored it. I might have even scored it at 117, 111. I thought that round, was it 7 or 8 that I'm the Conor Benn one with that big overhand right at the end, but I still thought that. And you know, I think that obviously the reason why this fight happened is because of the history with their fathers, obviously, and the build of the first fight, and obviously, Chris Eubank Senior, one of the I probably one of the he's definitely the greatest showman in the history of British boxing, maybe the greatest showman in history, you know, you know. Obviously under guys like Floyd and obviously the greatest Muhammad Ali, but he's one of the greatest showmen of all time in terms of showman boxers. But Conor Benn. All right, I'll stop talking about it. That's not what the video's about. Sorry. Let's get to Callum Walsh. I'm gonna make a huge video about about Conor Benn and Eubank Jr. Their second fight. I think it's a very very fascinating fight. But let's get to trying to go back here. Let's get to Callum Walsh. So recently, obviously, most people saw him on. He was the co-main event for Canelo versus Crawford. He took on this guy who is in the picture here, Fernando Vargas Jr., the son of Fernando Vargas, a legendary Mexican fighter. Who had really awesome fights against Oscar De La Hoya and a number of massive names. I mean, he was a very very popular guy from the late '90s, to the early to mid 2000s. He was a very very popular fighter, and still has a lot of fans to this day. And I'm the Vargas boys. There's Emiliano, Don Fernando Jr.'s brother, who I think is the best boxer of the three. I think that's kind of a consensus around boxing. Everyone kind of feels that Emiliano is progressing better and he's fighting better guys. Fernando Jr. is a good fighter, and he showed people he can box, he can move. He's a great athlete. He's definitely a guy based on this fight, which was the first fight I'd seen him live. I watched all his highlights up to the fight, but I hadn't watched him live. And many of his fights weren't on national TV or across the world because of the guys he fought. But in terms of everyone was there was really several guys who were saying at the time of this fight that this wasn't really fair to the Callum Walsh to have a fight a guy who was, in terms of the world ranking, is definitely a little lower than you might think. But I mean, and let's be honest, I didn't know Callum Walsh was this young. He's 24 years old. I thought Callum Walsh was like 28, 26 at the youngest. I think he was 24. Now I understand, this pacing. And I didn't know that until literally like 20 minutes before this video, because I just assumed this whole, because I think when they showed the tail of the table, I probably saw 24, but this whole week I've been doing other stuff at work and preparing other videos for a bunch of other fighters and MMA stuff. Isaiah shout out to Isaiah, awesome job with his edit for his promo video for UFC 320. Got one thing to say about that. Marab Info. Marab Info. Marab Info. Marab Info. 4. Can I do 4? Marab in 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 rounds. 4 rounds. Marab Info. I ain't done. But going to Callum Walsh, I mean, he's let's just go over his young career right now. As I said before, he had a good win over Fernando Vargas Jr., which I'll get to a little more later in the video. But he's a good fighter. He's 24 years old. He's 15-0. He has 11 knockouts. And to be honest, before I started playing this video a couple days ago, and I was planning it really on Sunday morning after when I was doing the big boxing, I'm not review show, which appreciate all the views on that and the Canelo Crawford final thoughts video. Appreciate it, guys. Please, obviously, like and subscribe, please. Obviously, I should say that more, but I don't. But whatever. Who gives a fuck? Um, but Callum Walsh is a really solid fighter, and fully honest, man, I like on Sunday when I was all right, I'm gonna make a Callum Walsh video about his young career. I honestly, because I did the same thing for Xander Zayas, and I really thought he would have a similar career to Zayas, and he actually hasn't. Zayas has been fighting, I think, a lot. Let me go just check that real quick. Let me just make sure I'm correct. Is because Zayas has been fighting as a pro for since 2019. That's about 6 years at this point, and he's young. He's 23, but he's the WBO junior middleweight champion of the world. Um, over a over, and obviously go check out my video on that. I wish I could put it in the thing, but I might put it in the. I won't do that actually. But I thought it was a very very important fight for him. He had a really good win over Jorge Garcia Perez, but they don't really have the same careers, and there's some common bones. I'll get to that later in the video, but I do think that really you know there's a lot of interesting things talk about with Callum Walsh. One thing obviously everyone knows, he's currently dating the UFC. She's strawweight or flyweight. Tavarici, Brazilian woman. She's very pretty, and I do think that there are people in the MMA and boxing community, that do think that the relationship is bad for him or it's good for him. I don't know. I think it's cool. I think obviously he met her through his association with Dana White, who's been he Tom Loeffler is his manager, and promoter, but Dana's been a part of managing him and promoting him for most of his career, um, and that's why people. And truth is, that's why people know his name. That's how people knew him before he fought Fernando Vargas Jr. at the Canelo Crawford event. I have known about Callum for just myself probably since I got to be honest, probably since his when he fought Wesley Tucker. I think it was his sixth or seventh fight. It was his. I think it was a six pro fight. Yeah, he fought Wesley Tucker. I'm in the Gaines Arena. I'm in Boston, and Wesley Tucker was he had, and honestly he wasn't a great fighter. It wasn't like a world champion. Obviously his last fight was against Callum Walsh. He hasn't fought since then, and but in terms of who he fought, he never really fought anyone really great. Was definitely more of a regional type guy. But but for a guy like Callum Walsh, who fought him 2023, 2 years ago, who was 22 years old, it was a big win. It was a big win for him. To fight someone that at best was a pretty middle level, I'd say a mid level U.S. I'd say that this guy was Thugger was a pretty good the USA regional fighter, and Callum beat him, and it was a really good fight. I knocked him out in 2 rounds, and I remember people, that's when I heard about him, and he was 6-0, and really, he's been fighting really actively. I mean, he only turned pro in 2021 at the age of 20. He was 20 years old when he turned pro, and I honestly, for some reason, I thought he was fighting before COVID, but now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like he was spoken that was probably going to turn pro before COVID, but obviously COVID happened. Just to give his amateur career, his amateur career was 45 wins and 9 defeats. His last fight, he fought a guy named Aiden Walsh. Kind of funny, it's Callum Aiden Walsh. He himself was actually I'm a longtime manager who actually beat Callum Walsh in his last amateur fight. But there are guys like Aiden Walsh who are really good amateurs who just don't turn pro because there's no money in them for them or whatever. But I'm trying to look at his amateur career. See anybody that I actually recognize. That's currently a really good current. I'm a current pro fighter. I don't really see anybody that I recognize. There's probably somebody in there who I'd say is a pretty decent. I don't see anybody really. obviously, in 2013, which was 8 years, or which was 12 years ago. Um, how old would he have been? He was 12 years old. He was a kid. He was a kid boxing. And he's been, and let's be honest, 45-9. That's a pretty good, that's a pretty good amount of amateur fights for a guy who's a kid. But to turn 20 at pro was impressive. And when he was an amateur, he was at middleweight or whatever the amateur middleweight was, whatever. And he started, I remember after the West Tucker fight, I was like, okay, and that's about, I don't know if Dana White was involved with him yet, but that's when I realized that he was training at the wild card, or I don't know if I think he was at that point, but I was like, oh, he's training with Freddie Roach. Wow, okay. Um, there's a Dana White looking for a fight episode on the UFC channel. One of the shows that Dana White used to do that I used to love actually. Really wish they would do that more, but obviously, as Isaiah has made his rant on, and also I spoke on, Dana White has no time for that for a number of reasons. Of course, me and Isaiah will make videos talking about everything about Dana White that we don't like that he's been doing recently. But afterwards, Tucker he fought for the WBC USA silver weight title against Carson Jones. You know, the longtime pro fighter who's fought in a number a number of decent guys. Michael Clark. I mean, he's fought in a whole lot of fighters. I mean, I think the time that he fought, I'm trying to look who he fought. I don't know. I really don't recognize. He fought the Jesus Soto Carras, and Soto Carras was a really solid sort of gatekeeper journeyman at 154 for about 15 years, and he was really good for a number of years. His career record wasn't great, but the Soto Carras and Carson Jones were both kind of those guys where they were kind of the if you really wanted to be someone really really good I remember Carson Jones fought this guy Tyrone Brunson, who was at the time was undefeated, was 21-0-1, and he beat the crap out of him. That was way back in 2009, and I remember looking up highlights of that. Like, oh wow, holy shit! So obviously years later, not at the time, I was a kid, but trying to scroll up, but he was a long time pro, um, uh, and he's he fought legit guys. He fought Dean Byrne. He fought Ricardo Williams Jr. He fought um, and biggest fight that he had was the biggest fight he had was it was Kell Brook in 2012, which was years ago. And it's kind of funny looking at his career. He really he actually fought. Yeah, he actually fought. Kell Brook. The first time was really close. He almost beat Kell Brook, a future Hall of Famer, world champion. He then got knocked out by him in a rematch. But looking at his career, I mean, he was a good fighter. He actually fought Antonio Margarito in 2017. Then he lost it. Yeah, the lost lost to Ted Cheeseman, Stephen Butler. Really solid, good guys. And when he fought Callum Walsh, he hadn't fought. He took like a 3-year break between 2019 and 2022. So he came back at I mean, I forgot how old he was, but Carson Jones was a solid guy to fight at that point in his career. And Walsh was cut from a really bad headbutt. Um, he I knocked him down on the body shot in round 4. Jones got up, fight was stopped. He then fought the Juan Velasco. I feel like I've seen this name. I saw it earlier, and I'm like, I don't know this guy, but maybe I do know him. Oh, come on, man. Fucking see, I want to. I'm not dissing. I'm I'm not dissing Boxer right now, but they have this dumb thing about I've signed into the freaking account, dude. There we go. Yeah, Juan Velasco. He fought some good fighters, right? Yeah, Elvis Rodriguez. Yeah, he fought some good fighters. Yeah, the just program Mario Barrios. Yeah, good solid fighters. But guys like Velasco and guys like Carson Jones are former welterweights, and it makes sense he fights guys like that. Nata Velasco fought a really good fighter. I really saw a guy to Ismail Villarreal, who is a you know is a you know is still a solid guy. He's currently, I think he's what, 16-3 now. Yeah, 16-3. But when he lost to Callum Walsh, and they got knocked out by Brandon Adams, who is a guy who I'll mention later of a guy who Callum Walsh might be thinking about fighting soon. But he's a solid guy, and it was a good win for him to knock out. Or well, actually, he didn't. Yeah, he defeated Villarreal by unanimous decision. He then fought a couple of really mediocre type fighters, and then oh crap! Hold on a second, folks. Okay, so we're back. That was obviously in the video. It's a couple seconds or 1 or 2 seconds. For me, that was literally almost an hour. My girlfriend called and I was like, "Yeah, I'm middle recording, but okay." Well, let's continue. So, Callum Walsh's career. So, really, his coming out party was actually almost a year to the date when he fought Przemysław Rudanowski at the Three Arena in Dublin, Ireland. I think it was wasn't. I think it was his first fight in Ireland. Obviously, he was from Cork. He's from Cork, Ireland. But that's when the Southpaw Callum Walsh got in there against Murnowski, who is I don't think he's that good of a fighter. He's a solid guy. He beat Samuel Vargas, and you know Samuel Vargas is himself was, in my opinion, a very solid guy who fought really really tough guys. He fought he fought Amar Godoy. He fought Amir Khan. He really did fight some good solid guys. Fought Denny Garcia. He was a good fighter. So for there's a for Runowski to fight and actually defeat someone like that is impressive. Uh, and I think Josh Kelly do have something to maybe say. Josh Kelly, British guy, 17-1-1, is rumored to be fighting for the IBF title against the Bakram Murtazaliev, who fucking killer. So yeah, pretty boy Josh Kelly. He honestly, ever since he got knocked out by David Anisian in COVID, I've never. He's been a good guy since he beat Troy Williamson. He beat uh, you know the undefeated Ishmael Davis. He's a good fighter, but I don't know. I'm not really that high on him. He's a good fighter, but I don't know. I don't think he's proven that he's worthy of a title shot. But he'll probably get it because it's his one chance. He's 17-1-1. But when that fight gets announced, I will definitely go over that fight. I think Murtazalia beats the crap out of him, by the way. But yes, so after he defeated the Abernowski, it was he took on at the start of this year. He took on Dean Sutherland. I'm at Square Garden. This who I don't who he was a decent British fighter. Hasn't it was a good fighter. Hasn't fought anyone any of good note. But took on he's fighting this guy John Tane soon, but he got knocked out in the first round. So I mean, how good could he be? He's not that good. And then really Callum had his Callum had his hold on, somebody, what's going on? Goddamn box right, what's going on, man? Oh, hold on, something's going on. What's going on? Okay, sorry, Boxrec is giving me problems right now. What's going on? Let me just go to do this. Right back, guys. Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. We're back. So let's get to his, well, not official fight, but against the fight that I think was the biggest test of his career. Against Elias Espadas. Good, solid contender. Record obviously isn't great, but going into the fight, his record was 23-6-1. Looking at his resume, he's fought in number of really solid guys. I mean, didn't I mean, obviously, he started his career. I mean, he wasn't like he's one of those Mexican fighters that starts with some bumps in the like he starts growing like young. Like his name is the Latin kid. He's 34 years old. He's 23-7-1. Turned pro in 2012. So if we do the math, that's 13 years ago. He was 22 years old. Lost his second pro fight. Um, you know, lost to two. Lost to two American journeymen back to back. And Manny Woods and Dashing Johnson. Back in 2015, 2016. So he lost those two fights, and then he fought went to Mexico. Fought never really good. Lost to Yamaguchi Falco, who I think is who is a pretty good, solid fighter. He's viewed as the viewed as the he's a good, solid Brazilian boxer. He fought really one of the I'd say one of the best Cubans in boxing in David Morrell. Oh, I'd look at David Morrell if the thing would load, but whatever. I don't know why it's not working right now, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the I fought David Morrell, and he got knocked out, but he's still a good fighter. Um, and that was a fight that Espadas lost that fight. He then took on he took on a pretty solid American fighter, Demetrius Ballard, who was never a good fighter, but um, in there, which the fight was stopped, no contest. There was a really bad. There was a really bad cut on Espadas' head. It was a no decision. That will be we'll mention that later in a second with his fight with Callum Walsh. But Don Bauer went on to go fight Hyman Gia, got knocked out, and then knocked out by Shane Mosley Jr. But he's a good fighter. Um, in terms of his wins, I mean, he hasn't really beaten anybody. Now, I did mention him earlier in a previous video because he did fight Xander Zayas 2022, got knocked out in the fifth round. And even though Callum Walsh is credited with a technical decision after 5 rounds, um, it was a good fight. He was definitely winning the fight. He was certainly winning the fight. That's for sure. He was certainly winning the fight. Um, I don't think he was really. I don't really think he was. Let's just say I don't think he was. He wasn't. He wasn't dominantly winning. But Espada is a tough contender. He fought a number of good guys. He did lose to Zayas, but in that fight against Callum Walsh, he was losing the fight, but it was only after 5 rounds, so it was a 10-round fight. Probably wouldn't have won it anyway, but still. Um, and there was just what happened was really bad cut to the eye um, of Callum Walsh, and his corner got the doctor in there, and the doctor said, "All right, we're stopping it, but we've gone past 4 rounds. We can do a technical decision now," and he won a technical decision, I believe. Um, all 5 rounds, I'm pretty sure. So after that, he fought Brandon Vargas, obviously on the Canelo Crawford card, and I think the fight was close. I think that the fact that all the cards were either 99, 91, or 100 to 90 is ridiculous. Um, in terms of the stats, the fight I watched, I thought it was closer. I thought at the night of the fight, I thought, man, I think Callum barely won that. I think he won seven rounds to three, which would have been a score of 97, or would have been a score of 97-93. That's what the score should have been. Or is that what? Yeah, it would have been 97-93. That's what I would have scored it. Um, maybe 98-92, but to give for Don Charlo to score that fight 100-90 is ridiculous. I mean, Fernando Vargas there was clearly one or two rounds in that fight that he won just by being more active. And I don't care if, and also one thing Callum Walsh I don't like about him, and I'll get to this in a minute, is that he isn't now he's improved his accuracy. He when he landed against Vargas at the middle later part of the fight, he was more accurate. He starts just by throwing flurries though. He starts just by kind of getting in the mid range. Using his jab, which is good. Which is good to measure jab against guys like Vargas who aren't massively experienced, against like guys like Espadas who are tough contenders but haven't gotten to world level. Against guys like Amronowski or Carlos Ortiz Cervantes or Dean Sutherland, using your jab to using your jab to get distance. You know, you know, you know, you know, bing, 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 tap, 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 bing, tap, tap, bing, tap, tap, bing, bing. You know what I mean? It's okay to do that. Um, it's one thing I worry about him when he gets to world level. Now, beating Vargas was not ranked in the top 20 of any of the sanctioned bodies. The highest I saw was he was ranked 28th by the IBF. 28th. That's not even top 25. Um, and listen to me, Renan Vargas is a solid guy. I do think on BoxRec he's ranked number 51 in the world, um, which I think is a fair ranking. I do think is he one of the best 50 fighters at 154 possible. But I look at it, I mean his career record he's fought. I mean the only guy he fought good in his record was Brad Solomon, and Brad Solomon has not fought since, and hadn't fought in 2 years when they fought in 2024. Brad Solomon was a good fighter. Um, when Brad Solomon got destroyed by when he beat I'm going to beat Paddy Gallagher, a good British fighter. When he beat him, I was a big win. When he fought Virgil Ortiz in 2019, even though he lost in 5 rounds, he gave a good account of him. I mean, he lost all rounds, but he still was a good fighter. At the time when he fought Virgil Ortiz, he wasn't a slouch. I mean, he's a good fighter. Ortiz fought him, I believe. He was a good fighter. He was good. His record was 28-1. Um, he was never a great fighter, but and he was also never like you know he you know he was what the hell. Yeah, and, he was obviously no kind of actual um um you know he was never a kind of world beater, but he was a good solid fighter, and I think for him, Alexis Rocha is still around. Is he fighting recently? Alexis Rocha was the guy who was supposed to be this great. Alexis Rocha was supposed to be. I'm gonna make a video about like so many young guys who came to the zone at the start after COVID and were all supposed to dominate, but and even though Song had to fight, it was still a good solid win for Fernando Vargas Jr. It really wasn't any kind of great win. I think the fact that I think the fact that he fought someone like that is interesting or whatever doesn't really matter to me. But was it any kind of good win? He beat Brad Solomon, cool. Um, he fought Gonzalo Gaston Correa, who long time journeyman in the division. You know, mid level guy at best. So for me, I'm looking at his career record. He hadn't fought anybody. So if you're saying that Brad Solomon is the best on your resume, and, it's not the best, but it's decent. But compared to Callum Walsh had a far better resume. He was right. His strength schedule was way better. Um, he hasn't fought in any former world champions, but he's fought in good fighters, good guys who are still good and young too. I think for his career at the point, We look at his career record. He's 15-0 with 11 knockouts. I think it's a pretty good start for a guy who's only 24. Um, I think right now, at 24 years old, 15-0, um, he is currently ranked by BoxRec for number 14 in the world. He's ranked number 5 by the WBC. Ring has him number 7, and the WBO I think has him like 15 or 14. Those are the correct rankings. I think WBC got a little too high, but that's trust me, that's Mauricio Suleiman on the WBC for you right there. The Ring having him at 7 is I think that's right. And you're like, what do you mean? You just said that the WBO 15 was right. That's the more accurate. But the Ring is smart. The Ring's putting him 7. They're putting him above guys who are good, solid fighters who have fought for titles and stuff. They're putting him above that because he's got Dana White backing him. He's got the hype. He's a popular fighter. He's have Ricci, all the things together. And the Ring's and that's a magazine rating, and they're rating everything. They're rating style outside the ring. They're rating charisma, all this stuff. That's what they're rating. The thinking about is just rate usually just rank your record. Do they think that the second thing is, which is not publicized, but does that sanctioning body think that you could be fighting for a world title in succession of the guys in the guys behind you, and 3, the strength of your schedule and things like that, and the amount of and the quality of the wins. Um, but I think Boxford having him at number 14 makes sense. But let's now go take a look at what's next. At what's next for Callum Walsh. Let's just go on to BoxRec and go into I think the top 20, or let's go to the top 50. Okay, now there are good fighters like the Amjadri Nakhmedov, Ben Mahoney, some undefeated guys. Freddie Kowitz, the WBF champion. That doesn't even matter. Um, but there are really, so guys. 154 has got some really good fighters. There's a lot of guys. Brian Mendoza, former world champion. There are a lot of guys in this division who I would say are solid guys and can really do some good and can do some good things. Um, and so there's a number of guys who who really could be next for Callum Walsh. One guy who I would put up there as someone who I think should be in the ranking for fighting him is someone like a Carlos Ocampo. Good fighter. He's 29. He's 37-3. He's fought a number of good guys. He hasn't beat any really big names. He had the loss to back in 2018, he got leveled by leveled leveled by Errol Spence. When he fought for a world title, got obliterated. I mean, it wasn't even close. Kama got killed. He's a solid fighter though. He beat Jorge Garcia Perez, who just buzzed in his eyes for that title. But he's a solid guy. I mean, he hasn't won anyone great, but he fought Sebastian Fedora 2022. Got he went the distance. He lost, but he went the distance. He then fought Tim Tszyu in 2023. Got knocked out. So he's a solid guy. And it's proven that he can't win at world level. But I think it's important. I think that's a fight you could get. Like now, I'm going to start with guys who Callum could beat. I think he beats Carlos Ocampo. I think he boxes well with Carlos Ocampo. Moves side to side, uses his jab, and can kind of maybe break him down over the course of a fight. That's a fight Callum Walsh can win. I think guys like Ben Mahoney, he can win. I feel fighting someone like Brian Mendoza, a former world champion. I think that's a fight that is interesting. He's code 23-4. He just fought some journeyman back in July. He himself, besides the win, is coming off of 2 losses to Zimzu and Sergey Bochuk. I think it's a good, and he became champion because he shocked everybody and knocked out Fundora, which was crazy. That was really unexpected. I think in terms of former world champions, you have Brian Mendoza, You can fight Carlos Campo, who's a former, world title challenger. You have British guys like Sam Eggington, um, and in terms of other guys who I think he could beat, uh, you know, there's a really good young Cuban fighter, Jonas Tellez, who just keep has a recent victory over Julian J. Rock Williams. That's a good fight. Um, there's this young Greek guy, Andreas Katsarakis. He's good, 16-0. I think there's some good fights there. Michel Soro, he's a really good French fighter, 37 4-2. He's a good guy. He's actually fighting Evander Castillo, I believe, in Marseille. Castillo's never a good fighter, but he's a solid guy. But he's a good fight. He has a fight against. He has two fights against Madrimov. Soro's a good guy. He's older. Um, you know, Soro would be where I would go because he's got a good record. I think Charles Conwell. Everyone knows him as the guy who fought. Fought Patrick Day and gave him injuries, and then Patrick Day unfortunately passed away. I think there's Z brother. I'm seeing Nikita Zoo. Is this? Yeah, I think this is Tim's brother. I think Nikita Zoo's his brother, also 154 fighter. It looked pretty much the same. Yeah, good for him, man. He's been fighting decent guys. That'd be funny if Callum fought him. That'd be hilarious. And then there's guys like Josh Kelly. Now, if Josh Kelly is not fighting for a world title, I would also like a fight with Josh Kelly for Callum Walsh. It's Irish versus UK. Josh Kelly is a master boxer. Callum Walsh is more of a boxer puncher. Well, he should be. As the Charles Conwell fight's good. He could go and fight Jorge Garcia Perez, who gave 12 decent rounds to Xander Zayas in his fight for the vacant WBO for that title. Um, it's kind of funny that they have Callum Walsh ahead of Conor Benn, which is only because Conor Benn hasn't fought at this division much. Conor Benn has fought mostly, even though he's currently at 154 is his primary division in total. He's fighting at 160 against Chris Eubank because it's the Eubank fight. It's the rematch. But also, I think when Ben is done with that division, I think he's going to go. I think he might stay at 154. If there's, 154 is going to be stacked. In addition to Callum Walsh, in addition to all the names I mentioned, you got Jeremy Boutsenis, who's fighting Museum Lima on October 11th. You got Virgil Ortiz. You got Madrimov still around. You got you have freaking Murtazaliev, as the IBF champion. We'll see if he defends the title against Josh Kelly. Who knows? You have Xander Zayas. You have a number of good names, a number of really solid names. Sergey Bochuk, Brandon Adams, all those guys I mentioned recently. Sergey Bochuk just lost a good fight. Now, all the guys I mentioned, Garcia Perez, Conwell, Josh Kelly. I think Callum Walsh beats Josh Kelly, which means I think Josh Kelly has no chance, obviously, against Mirzalia, but they're giving it to him because he's Josh Kelly. Oh my god, he's Josh Kelly, PPK. His boxing's amazing. Let's be honest, David Avanesian beat the crap out of him. He beat the crap out of him. He destroyed him. And but I feel that those fights, Michelle Soro, Tellez, Brian Mendoza, Carlos Campbell, those guys I mentioned who are beneath Callum Walsh rankings, I think most of those guys either give him a really tough test, take him the distance, maybe get a close decision against him. And these are guys that could be Callum Walsh, but if he is as good as everyone's saying, he'll beat those guys. Now, the truth of the matter is this: in terms of Callum Walsh defending or fighting, Fernando Vargas Jr. is ranked number 51 by boxer. He's just outside of the top 50. Right now, there are other guys in from 50 to 100 who are really solid guys. There's some there are a bunch of guys that Callum Walsh can fight. I'm just talking about guys in terms of progressing his career. All the guys I mentioned, and if I was to go and look at the other what the guys ranked from like 50 to 100. There's there's some solid guys. Frederick Rojas is there. Damian Sosa is a good solid fighter. Joe Holmes Jr. is really good. Mitchell Davis. I mean, Ish was that's a good fight. Jorge Fortea. That's a good fight for him. I mean, there's a number of names that and all those guys. Sergio Garcia. The longtime European champion. All those guys who I just mentioned recently are all guys who will probably be the next opponent for Callum Walsh. It's gonna be one of those names or one of the other guys. Now, in terms of what if he's as great as Dana White says he is, what he should be going forward is I mean, above him you have Sergey Bodchuk. Let's look at him. I think he destroys Callum Walsh. Not destroys him, but I think he dominantly wins the fight. I mean, he took Virgil Ortiz's best shots and kept coming. And Virgil Ortiz, who after that fight, I said, "Oh man, I think Butch will win." But then Ortiz went and fought Israel Madrimov, who fought 12 good rounds against Bud, and Virgil looked improved, snappy, looked really, really good the whole fight. Um, then you have Tim Tszyu, former world champion. I think Tim Tszyu would be honestly the best fight out of all these guys. Um, there's the Mabas Baru, but he's super unproven. He just beat Jonas Tellez, but I don't. He's beating good guys. He's beaten Sam Eggington. He's beating Jonas Tellez. He's a good fighter himself, but that's a fight. I think Callum probably wins that. Um, but in terms of other guys, I mean, you have Jesus Alexandro Ramos Jr. He's a really solid guy. He's fighting Shane Mosley Jr. Um, and it's kind of funny. You know, he's actually going up, back to middleweight where he, you know, recent years, he has a knockout win over former junior middleweight champion Jason Rosario. So I mean, he's a solid guy. He's a guy who I think will be a tough fight. Erickson Lubin. I mean, we'll see how Lubin looks against Virgil Ortiz. But this when you get to, once you get past Lubin, you know, you do have UC Malima who Jeremy Boots Ennis is fighting. It's probably not going to be for the IBO title, which I don't know why. I'm assuming that that Lima is not going to fight their mandatory, and they won't they might not strip him because they haven't stripped Chris Eubank in well over a year, so maybe they probably won't strip him, but you know, he hasn't fought anybody good for that title. But we'll see. Um, we'll see. You see Malima. We'll see how he looks against Boots, obviously. But Brandon Adams. That's a tough fight for Callum Walsh, and then once you get past Lubin, you have guys like Ismail Jima, former champion, Keith Thurman, former champion, Sebastian Fundora, current champion, Virgil Ortiz, current champion, future champion, Xander Zayas, champion, Bakr Murtazaliev, really solid, good champion. So all the guys I mentioned in this part are guys who I think he struggled. I think anyone above him, I've mentioned, maybe outside of Barrow, Lima, maybe Lubin, depending on how he looks against depending on how he looks against Virgil. I think he struggles against. I think he struggles against Balhachuk. I think he could win over Tim Tszyu if he catches Tim Tszyu, but Callum doesn't have a. He's a good, strong fighter, good, tough. I don't think he has real stopping power. When if he sits down and loads up on shots, he didn't really do that against Vargas. We didn't see any real power, but he didn't. I mean, when he fought Espadas, who's a good, solid contender, a guy who I would view as a good mid-level contender level, almost the epitome of a pretty solid, good mid-level contender guy who's fought in a bunch of good names. Not great names, but good names. His shots weren't doing much effect. Liberty was stabbing him back, but not like real big power. Now Callum's young; he's 24. He's still growing. He's still getting better. So I'm just saying, if you're gonna progress him, now in terms of who he's fought, there are guys in back of him. who have many guys in back of him. Who I would put in front of him. Obviously, Connor Ben, Charles Connell, Josh Kelly, all these guys. But the difference is Callum Walsh is management in the white. All the reasons why, right? I think he struggles against Bohachuk. I think he could win against Tim Zoo, but I don't know. It'd have to be a boxing performance. Brandon Adams, if Brandon Adams fights the way he fought against Bohachuk, I think he beats the crap out of Callum Walsh, which is just kind of kind of coming forward. Honestly, he fought like Virgil Ortiz. He kind of came forward and just kind of moving forward, and he fought like Christian Emilio almost. He fought great. Um, yeah, and he won a great fight. I think Barrow. I don't know. Lima. We'll see how he looks. Ramos Jr. I think he struggles with that fight. Lubin. We'll see how he looks against Virgil. Madrimov. I think this is where where Callum's not ready. Madrimov loses. Thurman loses. Fandora loses. Virgil Ortiz loses. Xander Zayas, which that fight's been being talked about for a while. I mean, people said that they should have fought before one of them got a world title. I'm glad they're not. I'm glad they didn't fight. I'm glad that we could get that fight in 2 or 3 years when Xander Zayas is 25, and let's say he's 26-0, and let's say he's fought in Virgil Ortiz or Fedor and unified some titles, or even Murtazaliev, and Callum's coming up to fight for the undisputed title. I mean, out of all the I mean, I'm gonna make a video about 154 about the whole division. It's really really fascinating, and there are some. It's really great because you have so many good young fighters. You have Ismail Jimov's 30, all right, but you have Ramos Jr. who's 24 years old, all right. Callum Walsh is 24. Um, you got you have Bakari Samake who's ranked right below him. He's 22. He's young as hell. He hasn't fought anyone good. He beat the Brock Knapp, and he hasn't fought anyone great. But he's a young guy. You have Fedor's 27, Virgil's 27, Zerzai is 23. Yeah, Murtazaliev is 32, but it's not old. Obviously, Keith Thurman is 36, and Brian Adams is 36, but Bubba Trick's at 30. Tim Zoo is at 30, but he's taking a lot of damage for a 30-year-old in terms of him. But um, I mean, it's a pretty good. I mean, most divisions in the top 20 have a lot of guys in their late 30s. In the top 20, I'm only seeing one guy over 35. One guy over 30, or sorry, two. I see Brandon Adams and Keith Thurman. That's pretty good. So we'll see what Callum Walsh can do. I expect he's going to fight someone who I mentioned in my first part. Maybe someone like, Jonas Telez or Brian Mendoza or Carlos Ocampo. Or maybe he fights the really solid, Argentinian kid Francisco Daniel Veron. He's really good. Um, maybe he fights Ben Mahoney. Maybe he fights Sam Gilly. Maybe he fights Sam Eggington. Maybe he takes on, Sadruddin uh, yeah, Sadruddin Akhmedov. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he takes on Amian Marcos. He's 14-0. He's 25. There's a lot of names out there that Callum could fight and I think beat. We'll see what happens. I'll be interested to see what happens. I'd be interested to see how things pan out. And I am interested to see on where his career goes from here. So that's going to do it, guys. A bit of a long one, but I kind of want to get this done to get it out there. I probably won't make a pure Callum Walsh video until he fights for a world title or fights someone around that level. He's 24. He's young. I don't think he's going to be fighting those guys I mentioned at the end who are above him in the rankings. I think he's definitely going to fight some. I mean, he'll probably fight someone if he wants to stay active. He's probably going to fight someone who's not even a top 100 fighter. I wouldn't be shocked. I would be. I would be happy if he fought if he fought someone like a Sam Eggington or a Freddie Cowitt or a Carlos Ocampo, or if fought someone like that, I'd be happy. Someone who's fought for a world title, who's a good fighter, fought in good names, good record, a little older but still game. I'd be excited for that. So let's see what they do with Callum Walsh, and that's gonna do it, guys, for the final round. My name is Jake, and remember, the greatest fighters always leave it all in the final round. See you guys.